All right. Hopefully that's done correctly. All right. I better turn this off, I guess, because I can hear myself. Here we have some fundamental principles of carrying, whether it's carrying from one rishus into another rishus, from one area into another area, from the private area to a public area, or a public area into a private area, or whether one is carrying 4 cubits, that's roughly 2 meters, in a public area. So we're actually going to go through the text because otherwise it's going to be extremely difficult. So I'm going to try and move through fairly quickly, but it's very important. We're going to see some very interesting scenarios in which actions are patur, and Maimonides says patur, which means exempt, literally means that the person who does it is not punishable. It's forbidden but not punishable, as opposed to other things which are forbidden and punishable. And these are therefore scenarios that one could take advantage of in times of need or in situations of emergency. Because it's sort of a gray area. It's forbidden, but it's not punishable. Secular law does not accept such a situation. If something is forbidden, it is almost always punishable. Well, not in South Africa, but we're not talking about South Africa. We're talking about normal places. A person who transfers an object, halacha number 1, a person who transfers an object from one domain to another, or one who carries an object beyond 4 cubits in the public domain, is not liable unless he lifts the object up from a place that is at least 4 handbreadths by 4 handbreadths and places it down in a place that is at least 4 handbreadths by 4 handbreadths. So there has to be, to be liable for carrying on Shabbos, one has to pick it up and put it down. The same person has to both pick it up and put it down. And we're going to see how that's defined. If one person picks it up and another person puts it down, or if one person doesn't pick it up in a way which is considered picking it up, or he doesn't put it down in a way which is halachically considered putting it down, then the action might be forbidden, but it's not punishable. Okay, and that the place that one picks it up from and puts it down on has to be at least 4 handbreadths by 4 handbreadths. So if we look down the bottom, 4 handbreadths by 4 handbreadths, okay, doesn't tell us. A handbreadth is about 10 centimeters. So it's round about 4 times 10, 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters. Normally, one picks the object up from the ground, and that is clearly bigger than that. But if it's smaller than that, and there aren't many objects which are smaller than that, but if one picks it up from something which is smaller than 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters, that is not considered public domain or private domain. In halacha, it's called a makom patur, a place where one is exempt if one puts it there or takes it from there. If it's small, the area is smaller than that. That isn't what we're going to be focusing on so much at the moment. A person's hand, halacha number 2, is considered equivalent to a place which is 4 handbreadths by 4 handbreadths in size, even though a hand isn't that large. Therefore, a person who removes an object from another person's hand in one domain and places in the hand of a third person in a second domain is liable. So if you are standing in a public domain, it doesn't really matter where you're standing, but there's one person standing in a public domain and another in a private domain, and you take it from the hand of one person and put it into the hand of the other person, or the one person is standing, both people are standing in the public domain, but they are more than 2 meters apart, 4 cubits, and you take something from the one person's hand and put it in the other person's hand, so one has transgressed Shabbos. That's libel, which means it's forbidden and, God forbid, punishable. Incidentally, this is all talking where there's no Eruv. None of this applies in a place where there is an Eruv. So in Johannesburg, it really doesn't apply in the Jewish areas at all. I know that Cape Town, it's better than it was, but I think there might be areas not far from the, not a long walk from where the Jewish community lives, where there isn't an Eruv. There might even, I don't know, are there communities that are, which are outside the Eruv? Are there? There are?
Sure, yeah, there are.
Okay. Sorry?
The community that I'm in doesn't have an Eruv.
Oh, what community is that?
Constantia.
Ah. Oh, yes, I know that. Yes, I do know that. Okay. So it's important for you to know these things, but it's even more important for those who live in places where there's an Eruv. And that's because we all go away. We don't stay in our homes 365 days a year, lockdown or no lockdown. People go on holiday. In South Africa, they go overseas, they visit family. And it's important to know how to behave when there's an Eruv. One of the big concerns, where there isn't an Eruv, one of the big concerns of having an Eruv is that children grow up not knowing about the prohibition of carrying on Shabbos. So when they go to a place where there isn't an Eruv, they don't know what not to do. They're a bit lost. And actually, this chapter is very helpful because it will give us a number of ways, if one does forget and one does carry in a place where there's no Eruv, how one can resolve that without becoming punishable. Okay. Similarly, a person is liable if he was standing in one of these two domains and stretched his hand into the other, removed an article from there or from the hand of a person standing there, and then returned his hand. So the person doesn't actually go anywhere. Let's say that you are standing by the fence of your property, and there is somebody standing outside your property, and you stretch your hand outside your property into the public domain, outside the fence, and you take something, I don't know, a drink from the person outside, and you bring it in, or vice versa. One has broken Shabbos. One has taken something, carried something from the public domain into the private domain, even though one didn't actually move. And this applies even though he didn't place down the article in the domain in which he's standing. Since it's in his hand, it's considered as if it were placed on the ground. He himself does not go from one domain to the other, only his arm does. And he doesn't actually put it down, it's just in his hand, but he's broken Shabbos. So similarly, you can't pass something to someone who's in the public domain, if you're in the private domain. Okay, in halacha number 3, if someone's eating and he walks from one domain to the other, he's liable, even though the halacha is, if a person carries something in an unusual way, it's forbidden but not punishable. In this case, food is the normal way one of the normal ways, in the mouth is one of the normal ways of carrying food. And so that person is considered to be, has broken Shabbos. As opposed from, let's say, for example, the person was carrying the object in his shoe. If the thing is in your shoe, and please don't get me wrong, I am not suggesting that you carry food in your shoe, but if the thing is in your shoe, as you walk from one domain to the other, it's forbidden, but it's not punishable, because that's not the normal way of carrying something. Okay, now we have some rather, the next paragraph here, similarly, has a rather weird case where the person spits into another domain, or God forbid, urinates into another domain. It's the same problem, that the person is liable because the person has effectively thrown the spit or the urine from one domain into another domain. Okay. Believe it or not, I hesitate to learn this, but it's quite intriguing. If a person is standing in one domain and the male organ, the tip of the organ is in the second domain, and he urinates into that second domain, he's not liable. He's not liable because although he is in the private domain, the place where the urine is coming from is in the public domain, and it's going from the public domain into the public domain, so he's not liable. That isn't something that I think most Jewish people, or most people in general, would need to know. Okay. All right, I'm going to skip this, where it's water. It isn't really that relevant. In Cape Town, maybe it's relevant if something is floating on the water, but I don't know that we need to look at it. There are other more important things. Here, halacha number 5. As mentioned above, a person who transfers an object from one domain to another is not liable as he removes the object from its place and the places it down in a new place, from one domain to the other domain, or 4 cubits in the public domain. When, however, one removes an object but doesn't place it down, or places down without lifting it up, one isn't liable. Therefore, when a person standing in one of 2 domains extends his hand into another domain while holding an object, and another person takes it from him, or if another person places an article in his hand and he retracts his hand, neither is liable. Neither the person who removed the article nor the one who placed it down. Again, let me clarify. This is very important to know. If you are standing in the street and you have an object in your hand and you extend your hand into a private domain, in South Africa, you have to be careful that you don't lose your hand, your arm, or even worse, God forbid. But let's assume that it's safe to do so. And the other person takes whatever's in your hand out of it, right? You have lifted it up from the public domain, but you haven't put it down in the private domain. The other person did that. So neither one is liable, is punishable, because neither one of them lifted it up and put it down. So in a case, for example, where you accidentally forget and you're carrying something in the street, and you realize you're carrying something in the street, then one way of resolving the problem of getting that thing into the private domain is that if there's another person that you know in your house, you can continue walking, don't stop. I'll tell you why in a minute, and call out to the person in your home. They come out to the fence, you put your hand through the fence, and they take the thing out of your hand. Okay, then you have not transferred the object from the public domain into the private domain. You did half. The other person did half, and they can't be joined together to be punishable. Yes? Neither one is punishable for that. One can't do that deliberately, right? One isn't meant to do that on an ongoing basis, but if need be, it's a way of resolving the problem. Let me clarify. If you are walking in a place where there's no Erev, and let's say you put your hand in your pocket and you realize that you've got a tissue in your pocket, for example, so you're carrying in a public area, what you don't do is take it out of your pocket and throw it away. You don't do that. We'll see why in a minute. Okay. This only applies, halacha number 6, when the giver's hand is more than 3 handbreadths above the ground. 3 handbreadths is 30 centimeters or 24 centimeters roughly. In halacha, something which is within 3 handbreadths of the ground is considered as if it's on the ground. So if your hand that you extend into the private domain is that close to the ground, then when you put your hand through with the object in your hand, it's considered as if you placed it down. Incidentally, the same principle applies to a sukkah and many other situations, that if the wall of a sukkah comes within 3 handbreadths of the ground, we consider it as if the wall of the sukkah extends all the way to the ground. It's a principle which applies in many different situations. Okay. Halacha number 7. When one person is standing in either of these 2 domains and a colleague extends his hand from the second domain, takes an object from the person standing in the first domain and brings it in, or the colleague takes an object from his domain and places it in the hand of the person who is standing, the person who is standing is not liable at all. Why? He did absolutely nothing. Yes, if you're standing in the street and your hand is out, and somebody stretches his hand out of the private domain and puts the object into your hand, he's the one that's lifted up the object in the private area and put it down in the public area. He's the one that's done the forbidden act. You haven't done anything. Yes? It was his colleague who placed the object in his hand or took it from his hand. The colleague is therefore liable, for he removed the object from its original place and put it down in a new place, transferring from one domain to another domain. You do nothing. The fact that somebody uses your hand as a receptacle means that you're not responsible for that. You haven't done anything at all. Any questions at this stage? Is a very, very important halacha. When a person is standing in either of these 2 domains and a colleague puts an object in his hand or loads it on his back, and the first person goes out to another domain carrying this object in his hand or on his back, he becomes liable when he stands still. In Jewish law, in halacha, when you stand still, it's considered as if the object that you are carrying, either on your back or in your hand or wherever, is now resting on the ground. You don't actually have to place the object on the ground to be considered in Jewish law as putting it down. When you stop moving and you're carrying that object, it's considered as if you did put it down. Right, so let me give you an example where it's very, very important. Here's a very important halacha implied by that. Therefore, if a person went out holding the object in his hand or carrying it on his back, and he didn't stand still in the second domain, right? Let's say he went from his home into the street and is carrying something in his hand, in his pocket, on his back, and he did not stand still in the second domain. He never stopped moving. but rather returned to the first domain while he was holding the object, he's not liable. If he turns around in the street without stopping and goes back through the gate into his home, he hasn't broken Shabbos. Why? Because he never put the object down in the public domain. He never stopped moving in the public domain. Now, that's not easy practically, because probably you closed the gate when you went outside. And if you close the gate when you went outside, it's going to be extremely difficult to keep moving to keep moving while you're trying to open the gate and get back inside. But if there's someone else with you, that person may be able to open the gate for you, or you could call out and ask somebody inside to open the gate for you. So you've actually broken Shabbos, but you haven't broken Shabbos. You've carried something from the private area into the public area, but because you haven't stopped, we don't consider it as if you put it down. And because we don't consider it as if you put it down, you haven't broken Shabbos. You've just got to walk back into the place where you were, and as long as you don't stop moving, you haven't put it down in a public area, you haven't broken Shabbos. Incidentally, it doesn't have to be that way. It could, let's say, for example, you walk out of your gate, and you realize while you're walking that you're carrying something, and you know you haven't stopped. You know you haven't stopped in public area. You could continue walking to the place where you want to go, and if you can go inside without stopping walking, again, you haven't broken Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that, to walk from one house through the public area to another house without stopping, carrying stuff. It's forbidden. But if you didn't stop, it's not punishable. So in a situation where you make a mistake and you go outside and you don't realize you're carrying something, so, okay, it was a mistake. You're not punishable because it was a mistake. People make mistakes. You're not allowed to do it intentionally. You didn't do it intentionally. If you don't stop in the public area, you can continue walking to your destination. Make sure you don't stop before you go in the gate of your destination, and you haven't broken Shabbos. We're not going to see it here. Another option would be as follows. If you can't get in through the gate, in South Africa, it's very difficult because of security, and many places throughout the world, it's very difficult to go through a gate without stopping to move. But what you can do is, instead of going through the gate, remember you can't stop walking. While you are walking, you can throw the object over the fence into that private area. Now, if it's something valuable, you probably won't want to do that. If you care about Shabbos, you might well say, well, I don't really care about this object breaking. I don't want to break Shabbos. So you might, throw it, even if it's going to smash. But let's say it's something which isn't that valuable. You walked from one house outside. You haven't stopped walking, and you realize you're carrying something. You can continue walking to your destination. You see, oh, I can't get through this gate. I'm gonna, it's not practical for me to get in. I'm gonna have to stop walking. You can, if you want, while you're still walking, throw the object over the fence into the private domain. And again, you never put the object down in the public domain. You kept moving, and it landed in a private domain. It's okay. You're not allowed to do that intentionally, but in a situation where you made a mistake, that is a permissible way of fixing your mistake. Okay, here's an important halacha. In Jewish law, even if a person stands still to adjust his load, he isn't liable. To be held liable, he must stand still to rest. So let's say you're carrying something on your back and you stop because it's not comfortable and you want to adjust the load on your back, so you stop. In Jewish law, that's not considered stopping, because you're not intending to rest. You're just adjusting the load. In order to adjust the load, you have to stop. So if you do stop to adjust your load, it's not considered stopping. Yes? But if you stopped in the public area to rest, then it is considered as if you put the object down, and that changes things halachically as to what you should do. We've been talking about someone who doesn't stop in the public area, how he can fix his mistake. Okay. Okay, here we go. For this reason, a person who is carrying an article on his shoulders when Shabbos commences, so Shabbos begins and he's carrying something on his shoulders, or he's carrying the object in his hand or in his pocket, it doesn't matter, and Shabbos begins. Now remember, he did not pick the object up on Shabbos. He was walking at a normal pace or running when Shabbos began. So there is no picking up of the object. So he should continue. When Shabbos commences, he should run with it, or he should just continue walking with it until he reaches his home, and then again throw it inside in an abnormal manner. So you just, as I mentioned before, you continue to move and you throw it, I didn't mention before, in an abnormal manner. So you could throw it inside, for example, with the wrong hand. With your wrong hand. Okay. Okay. Next halacha. When a person removes an article from its place in the public domain and walks, carrying it less than 4 cubits and stands, he's not liable. So if you are in a public area and let's say you're standing still in a public area and you realize while you're standing that you've got something in your pocket that is valuable, yeah? If you are standing still and you realize you've got it in your pocket or on your back or in your hand and it's now Shabbos, so we said that standing still is exactly the same as putting it down. So you can just drop it. If you're standing still and it's of no value to you, you can just drop the thing where you are. I know we're littering, but Shabbos is more important. If you want to do tshuva for littering, then on Sunday you can go and pick up a bunch of litter from that area to fix up the litter that you did on Shabbos. But if you realize that you're carrying something on Shabbos and you're standing still in a public area, you can just drop the thing where you are. Or here, another option, where the thing is valuable and you don't want to just drop it. If you walk less than 4 cubits, that's less than 2 meters, and stands, he's not liable. Remember, standing has to be standing not to adjust the load, but to rest. Because the prohibition is picking it up, carrying it more than 4 cubits and putting it down. Here the person is walking less than 4 cubits. So in this case, it's forbidden, but it's not punishable, not liable. Moreover, even if he continues this pattern, in other words, stopping, walking less than 4 cubits, stopping again, and then walking less than 4 cubits. It's going to take time, right? Because there's a lot of stops here. That he continues his pattern the entire day, carrying the article less than 4 cubits, stopping and then proceeding further. He's not liable. He's not liable. Again, if he's standing in order to rest, not if he's standing to adjust his load. And utilize this with a child. Let's say you've got a child who just refuses to move. In the public domain, you are walking home from shul, you're walking home after lunch, and this child refuses to move, right? So the child is just sitting there or standing there and isn't going anywhere. So one option is to just leave the child there and go. It might be a very good idea because that's a naughty child. And that will teach the child a lesson if the family completely abandons him or her and never comes back to get him. He will learn a good lesson. But that wasn't serious. If a better way of dealing with it, if you love your child, which you probably do, we spoke of doing tshuva for dropping litter. I think the tshuva necessary for abandoning children in public is the tshuva required would be a lot heavier than that. But what you can do is pick the child up, walk less than 2 cubits, put the child down, and then walk less than 2 cubits, 4 cubits, less than 4 cubits. Remember, you're not standing to adjust your hold on the child. You are standing in order to rest. Then there's no problem. You can carry that child all the way from shul to home if the child refuses to move. Normally, that's forbidden. You can't do that intentionally. But when you're talking about a child who can walk but refuses to walk, yes, so then this is a matter of the well-being of a child. And one can rely on this in order to get the child to the gate where the child lives, and hopefully you'll be able to encourage the child to walk from just outside the gate into the home. And if that doesn't work, if the child will not take that one step from outside the gate into the gate, then I suggest you rely on the other way of dealing with it, which I suggested earlier, which is that you can pick the child up while you're walking, can't carry him 4 cubits, and throw the kid over the fence into the house. Because if that little brat doesn't walk 1 step to go into the house, then it deserves to land in the bushes in your front garden. I'm not serious. Okay. It's 4 minutes past 9 o'clock, 9:05. Halacha number 11 is very interesting. I'm sorry we didn't get there. I'm just, if you don't mind, I'm going to mention it. I said you might like to finish the chapter. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance for all of it. If you pick up a pole, a spear, or the like lying on the ground, in other words, you lift up one end of it and you push and you flip it over, or a rake, so that the one end is moving and the other end, your end is moving. You flip it over so that the other end of the object, do you understand what I'm talking about? I'm not very good at explaining sometimes. You don't lift one end from the ground, you're just lifting only one end of the pole and tipping it in front of the other end. So the halacha is that you can continue doing that. Why? Because here the rationale is that the person never really lifted the object up from the earth, because one end of the object always remained on the ground. It's not the same end of the object, but every time he lifted up one side of it, the other side stayed on the ground. If you drag it along the ground, then it's a problem. But if you do it as I said, it's not a problem. Incidentally, that means, practically speaking, if there is a swing in a public area, you can you can push your child on that swing in a public area, because the child is moving, but the child is not stopping, and similarly the swing. It's almost like the situation with the rake or the pole, where part of it is staying the same. The top of the swing is staying where it is, and the other end, it's only the other end of the swing which is moving, and again, it's not stopping. The only problem is if you push the child on the swing, and the child or something the child is carrying falls off the swing. Then you've if it's more than 4 cubits away, then you have effectively thrown the child 4 cubits. It won't be so good for the child, but again, it wasn't intentional. And since it wasn't intentional, one is basically exempt, because one didn't intend to do that. Nobody intends for the child to fall off the swing. So bottom line is, you can push a child on a swing in the public domain. Okay. Right. Sorry, I went hopelessly over time. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, Rabbi. Rabbi?
Yeah, I'm listening.
So if you're walking on Shabbos and you realize that you got, like, say, money in your jacket pocket, and there's no, what's the best thing to do then? I mean, just stop walking, or just take money out, leave it under a stone or rock, or carry on walking?
Okay, so what matters is, what were you doing when you realized you had the money in your pocket? Were you walking or were you standing?
Walking.
Okay. Had you stopped in the public domain?
Well, if you come to a traffic light and it's red, you'll stop, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So you've now carried this object and put it down in the public area. So that's already a problem. The question, though, is it was unintentional, so it's not such a. I mean, it's forbidden, but it's not punishable because one didn't intend to do it. All right. So you stopped at a traffic light and you continued walking. What you should do in that scenario, and you don't want to lose the money, obviously, right? It could be a few $100 rand. Right. So I spoke of 2 options. One option is you get to the private domain and you, without stopping, you open a gate and go inside. Right. So you can't stop again. If you get to another traffic light, you have to continue walking, looking like a meshugana, around in order not to stop.
Okay.
Right. Or you get to the gate and you, without stopping, you throw the money over the fence.
Okay.
That could be difficult because the money probably won't go necessarily where you want it to go, and it could end up blowing back into the public area. Right. So in Jewish law, that is not punishable because you didn't do the breaking of Shabbos wasn't intentional. You were intending to throw it into the public area. It landed to throw it into the private area. It landed in the public area. So one isn't punishable. However, you probably lost the money, which was not what you wanted.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. It's a shame that we didn't have time to finish because there's some fascinating cases coming up. If you throw something that's tied to a rope and you can pull it back to him, is one liable? Is one not liable? if you throw something and it lands in the hands of another person, is one liable or not liable? It continues. It's very, very interesting. But we've covered most of the laws in this chapter which are helpful to us. I'd like to wish everyone a very good Vach, Shavua Tov. Have a wonderful week.
Rabbi, thank you, Shka.
Thank you
Shavua
very
Tov.
much. Shavua Tov. Thanks very much.
My pleasure. God bless, guys. God bless.
Cool to Rabbi. Thanks. Cool to publish. Shavua Tov. Very good. Thanks.